All right, so in our last unit for algebra, we're going to kind of take all what we've done in the year and put it together and, really move you towards what you're going to do in Advanced Math 1 and then Advanced Math 2. When I look over what I teach in Advanced Math 2, this unit is actually the first unit of Advanced Math 2, although simplified version. But the things here that I have in blue, let's start with functions. Remember that a function is just simply notated as f of x is a function, so f of x equals something over here, and the something over here has to make sure that no repeating x values. So that's what makes it a function, and we're going to work with all the ways in which we can deal with this f of x. And we've been doing this because I'm going to kind of just use a highlighter here maybe. So we worked with linear functions, right? We only had an x, we dealt with some slope, and some right here was the y-intercept, right? So that we had this line going across here. That was our linear function, and we could also have the other linear function as if just f of x equals some y value, right? We could have a horizontal line, and that would be linear. We've also this year worked on absolute value functions, right? And these were functions that always look like a v. It could be a v up or a v down. We could change how wide the v is, and that was in the form f of x equals some value a, x minus h plus k. All right, we also, you just finished working on quadratic functions, right? These were functions that look like u's, and we had different ways. We could have standard form, right? We called this one standard. We had vertex form, and we had the form that showed us the roots, when you factored it. Factored form, we call that factored. All right, so we have things that look like u's, and we also spent time this year working on exponential functions, and these were functions that could grow or decay, right? Could go that way. And we're going to kind of come back to these functions, and when we're using these functions this time, we're really going to look at, well, how can I transform these functions? How can I move them up or move them down? How can I move them left or right? How can I put that all together? How can I notate it that I'm moving the whole function around? We can also look at how can I make the function grow faster, grow slower, make it thin, make it fat, right? These are all things that we do when we say we're transforming the function. So we're going to look at linear functions, absolute value, quadratic, exponential, in terms of how do we transform it. We're also going to add in two new things. We're going to deal with something called the square root function, and this is when we have the square root of x. We haven't seen that before. And then we could also make this slightly different in cube root function. Look at what happens when we have the cubed root of x. And we're going to see it's very close. Square root looks like this because we can't have a negative value in here, so it kind of just goes. And then the cube root function, you can have a negative value, so it's going to be up and down. All right, and we'll look at those two functions. And then finally in this unit, we're going to take, well, what happens? Let's see if I can make this be just a little bit bigger here. What happens if, let's see here, I want this one to be gone, and I want this one to be out of my way, and I just want this one. Okay. So what happens if we take two functions and we just add them together, or we take two functions and we subtract them, or we take two functions and multiply them, right? We're going to look at what happens to that algebraically, and we're going to look at what happens to it graphically, that we can add those guys together. So I think you'll see that this is taking what you know. We did transform functions all the way through. We have looked at the basic shapes of quadratic and linear and absolute value. We're going to add some new things, and I hope you like the project at the end of this unit. We're going to use Desmos to do a little drawing, because now we have different ways of making all kinds of different shapes. So we'll see if we can make a drawing with the functions that we learned this year.